Welcome to NAFA's July Big Ideas webinar, Building Relationships with Prospects and Clients by Combining LinkedIn Engagement and Offline Conversations. I am Brendan Burnett, and with us today is David Fisher. David J.P. Fisher, also known as D-Fish, is a sales expert, professional keynote speaker, and best-selling author. He builds on over 20 years of experience as an entrepreneur and sales professional, and he combines nuanced strategy and real-world tactics to guide individuals and organizations as they navigate and leverage the evolving landscape of sales. David has written extensively on both online and offline relationship building and business development. He is the author of 9 best-selling books, including in the networking in the 21st century series, as well as hyper-connected selling. He is also a contributing influencer to the LinkedIn sales and marketing blogs, the Sales Hackers blog, and the HubSpot sales blog. He's also contributed to sites such as the Social Media Examiner, Forbes, SpinSucks, and Business to Community. And David is the host of Beer, Beats, and Business podcast, where he gets a chance to interview leading experts, entrepreneurs, and experts, and also feature some beer as well. In a world soaked in technology and information, we are longing for human connection and relationships, and the secret to selling success lies in our fundamental capacity to connect with other people on a human-to-human level. Leveraging digital communication platforms like LinkedIn in the time of COVID-19 is critical, and it must be combined with time-tested interpersonal skills. So today, David is going to talk about creating combined digital and offline channels, and he'll also show you how you can position yourself as the expert. Before we get started, I ask that you type your questions in the Q&A and chat box throughout the broadcast, and please feel free to do that at any time. We're going to answer the questions during the Q&A at the end of the broadcast. And David, thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the NAFA Big Ideas webinar.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Hope everybody is as well. Wherever you are and whenever you are, welcome. I'm really excited to be able to share this time with you today to really look at how in this time of challenge, this time of uncertainty, this time of insert overused adjective here, how do you really continue to start to cultivate and leverage the business relationships that have always been important, but are now more important than ever. So I'm really looking forward to being able to dive in with you, both looking at this strategically, but also tactically as well. I did have a couple of polls that we're going to be asking throughout the session today. So I know Brendan has popped up the first one. Make sure you do take a quick look and see if you can answer that question real quick. We'll come back at you with the results in just a moment. But to kind of frame this conversation today, Brendan actually referenced that I've been talking about business development and networking and sales, both in the offline and online world for years. In fact, I wrote a series of books called Networking in the 21st Century, Why Your Network Sucks and What to Do About It, as well as the book Hyper-Connected Selling. And really what I've done in these books is looked at how do we navigate a changing landscape, because I think the one thing we can all agree on is that the world has changed quite a bit. And it was changing even before 2020. And obviously with all of the challenges that we face because of coronavirus and shelter in place, I mean, I'd be remiss not to at least acknowledge that this has really upended a lot of our existing business relationships, business models, kind of the business norms. But what I would also argue is that a lot of the things that have changed because of coronavirus, they were in the process of changing well before 2020. And in fact, one of the things that I think is really important to understand is what we're seeing right now is that because of coronavirus, we're seeing an acceleration of existing business trends as opposed to a complete and radical shift. So even today, when we talk about things like digital platforms, social media, Zoom calls, webinars, using LinkedIn. None of these things are new, right? And so rather than fear some of these changes that we're going through, I think what this will allow us to do is really accelerate our own development as individual professionals, but also we'll be able to, again, accelerate how we engage with and how we work with our prospects, our clients, our partners, our referral partners, our employers, our employees. And one of the things I'm going to frame today's conversation with is this idea that I call the sales Sherpa. And what I mean by that is that if you are a professional right now and you're in any sort of sales or influence capacity, technology has actually had a dramatic impact on how we sell, and it has to, because it's changed how we buy. And so no longer do we want to think about networking and sales and business development as a transactional thing, but rather we want to look at it as a relationship. And so over the past few years, I've developed this concept of the sales Sherpa. And it's really this idea that to be successful, we must be the guides, the resources that our prospects, that our clients, the people we work with need in this time where there's a ton of information. It's hard to get good advice. It's hard to get good feedback. We want to be the people that help them walk through their existing buying journey. And so I say that to be a sales Sherpa, your goal is to help your prospects and your clients make decisions more easily, more quickly, and with less risk. And so that's what we're really trying to do. And so if you think about every time you sit down and have a conversation with someone, with, again, maybe a new prospect, an existing client, whoever it might be, your job is to position yourself as that trusted resource. I think the word trusted advisor gets thrown around a lot. Sometimes it's an empty phrase, but I think if you can really grasp the idea that you want to be that trusted advisor, that when the people you work with have a problem in your sphere of knowledge, that you're the person that they come to. That's what we're trying to do. That being said, it's not necessarily that easy to do, right? You can't just hope. And a big thing here is we can't just think about selling and influencing as a transactional thing anymore. We have to think about it more in the terms of a long-term relationship. And it's really interesting. So just looking at some of the results from that first poll, the question I asked is, have you increased your LinkedIn and social media activity for business since the very shelter-in-place orders have taken effect? And it's interesting, over 61% or 61% have said yes, that you have, 26% about the same. So I think many of you on this call are feeling the push to be more engaged in a digital way. By the way, for those of you who aren't, that's totally cool. Hopefully I will give you some tools and some ideas today that'll help you feel more comfortable kind of diving right back in. Now, why is it so important that we do explore the ways that we can use digital tools to build better relationships with our customers? There's a couple reasons why, but one of the biggest is that not only are people changing how they engage and how they interact with people, but we're doing this in an environment where very specifically the financial industry is going through a great change. Some of you might be familiar with this concept of the great wealth transfer. And this is something that experts are looking at, where because of generational change, they're looking at a large amount of revenue and wealth that it's being held by the baby boomer generation and older. They're seeing that being transferred into the next generation, in this case, the Gen Xers and the millennials. Now, when they say there's some wealth that's going to be transferred, it's not a couple dollars. They're talking about $48 trillion being transferred over the next 20 years. That is an incredibly large amount of money. And if you are in the financial advice business, if you're a wealth manager, if you're in insurance, if you help people manage their money, you want to be aware that this change is happening. And what's very telling is that while this is happening, a lot of the next generation has actually said that they don't plan on keeping their money with their parents' advisors, with the professionals that their parents are working with. And I think that this is really important for you to wrap your head around, because it's very easy to think that, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I do. And as wealth is transferred to the next generation, I'm going to be the easy choice. They're just going to keep working with me. I'm going to get my clients' children, my clients' grandchildren are just automatically going to become my clients. And the reality is they're not. All right. Or at least they aren't, unless you put some effort and some work into it. All right. To make sure that you retain that. Because again, 2/3 are planning on finding new help. Now, if you want to capture those clients and if you want to be of service to that next generation, what you have to understand is the way we connect has evolved, and it's continuing to evolve. That evolution is accelerating. And one of the main places that we tend to do, or we tend to engage with each other, is in this digital space. And we'll talk in a moment that this is not a complete transfer into the digital world. The old school human-to-human skills, just as important and just as relevant, but now we have to look at the other channels that are available to us. All of this, if you look at this slide, these are things that are happening right now as we run this webinar every minute, right? Every minute, 4.5 million YouTube videos are being watched. Every minute, 188 million emails are sent. By the way, speaking of YouTube, 500 hours of YouTube video are being uploaded every minute, right? So in 60 seconds, 500 new hours of video are on that platform. Just amazing numbers, staggering in fact. And what's really interesting though is that as we're seeing all of this digital communication, at the same time, and I think a lot of people are getting really nervous, like, hey, are we going to become pod people? Are we just going to, even now because of shelter in place, are we just all going to be stuck in our home offices and doing Zoom calls and that's it? But the thing is, at the same time, we're seeing this evolution in how people engage. There is this very strong impulse to still connecting on the human-to-human level. This is research done by LinkedIn, right? That one of the main social media platforms that actually shows that and this is specific to financial services, that affluent millennials, affluent Gen Xers are actually more likely to want to have a social network to go to get feedback from, to get help and support and advice from. And in fact, what's really interesting is that not only does the next generation want to have a social network, they actually want to have a person, a human being, a trusted guide, a trusted advisor that they can go to talk about these financial topics. I think if you look at this slide, it's really interesting to see that affluent Gen Xers, 75% of them think that a financial advisor is either nice to have or a must have. But if you look at it, 87% of affluent millennials, so the younger generation, want a financial advisor. So the younger generation actually is even more emphatic about the need to actually have a connection, have a human relationship with somebody that can help them manage their buying journey, right? And so understand that when you can really use these tools effectively, you're positioning yourself not only to be relevant now, but to continue to be relevant moving into the future. There's, I think, this fear, hey, there's gonna be robo-advisors or people are just gonna go to a website, click a button and get all their insurance. All that, like there's not gonna be a need for people anymore. That's absolutely not the case. And the research shows that we want to have this. But just like financial literacy, and I'm sure that's something you talk to a lot of your clients about, you have to be financially literate. You have to understand how all of these tools work to secure your financial future. In the same way, you want to think about the way that we communicate with people as in terms of literacy. So digital literacy has a wide variety of tools as well. So in the same way that you're having conversations with your clients about how to be more successful in their endeavors and to achieve their goals financially, you want to make sure that you are using all of these tools and improving your literacy with them to improve on your ability to engage and your ability to connect. Way back in the day, and by that I mean what, 30 years ago, if you wanted to talk to somebody, you had to see them in person, you had to give them a phone call, maybe send them a letter. That was it. Maybe we had faxes, right? We had fax machine, and ooh, so sexy, right? Now we can take all of those, except for maybe faxes. I don't know if anybody has a fax number anymore. And we can add social media, we can add LinkedIn messages, we can add direct tweets, we can add texting, we can add video and voicemail and video chatting. We now have so many more tools available to us. And I want to show you how to use some of these tools to build those relationships, to start them, and then again, to cultivate them so that you can leverage them to actually move business forward. So I want to go today over 3 parts of building your relationships using digital tools and again, offline conversation. The first is to help you share who you are. You have to be able to show up clearly, concisely, and in a way that's easy for your audience, the people you want to influence, to digest. You want to make it easy to engage with you. I want to talk about how to create connections. How do you actually build that network of prospects, of clients, of partners, of people that you can engage with? How do you start those relationships? And then finally, I want to talk about how do you cultivate engagement? How do you actually have a conversation with the people in your network? And how do you have a meaningful conversation that moves business forward? So let's go through these. The first thing we have to look at is how do we share who we are? How do we talk about who we are, what we do, how we serve people, how we help, and why, of course, somebody would want to engage with us. Now, I always think that we all work for a company called You Incorporated. Now, yes, you might have a larger company that you work with and that you represent, and that's fantastic, but we all have this other brand besides our company brand, and that's our personal brand. The one that no matter who our employer is, whether it's ourselves or the biggest company in the world, we still are the person who connects and engages with others. And so what you want to think about is, what is your brand? How are you perceived? How do you show up? And a very easy way to think about personal brand is actually just to break it down into 2 components. You want to think about visibility and reputation. That's it. That's what your brand is. Do people see you? And what do they think about you when they see you, right? Do they think about you? And when they think about you, what thoughts, emotions, feelings, values do they ascribe to you? Now, here's the thing. You can't actually tell people how to think about you. You can't say, this is my brand. This is how you should be thinking of me. I'm a trusted resource. I'm knowledgeable. I care deeply about the people I work with. That's how you should think about me. We can't do that. But what we can do is influence. We can put information out there that leads people to the conclusions that we have the brand that we want, that we are who we want to be. And so I want to give you a quick checklist that you can use to help kind of brainstorm not only what your brand is, but who you need to influence to share that brand. And this is something I'm going to suggest that you do afterwards. Pull out a piece of paper, open up a Word file, or even just use a notes file on your phone, but actually write the answers to these 3 questions. What is my business goal? Who is my most important audience? And how do I want them to see me? Now, I think it's critical that you write this down, because if you just have it in your brain, it's very easy to be nebulous and kind of vague. But if you actually write it on a piece of paper, you type it out, you say, my business goal is building my business. I would like to have more clients, for example. I'm going to even say, hey, why don't we even take it to the next level and get specific? How many more clients do you want? What type of people do you want to work with? If you're building a team, what type of people do you want to bring into your organization? The more specific you can be here, the better. Because when we look at that second question, who's my most important audience, you can actually be clear. If you're like, I'd like to bring in X number of this type of client. Well, then you know, hey, my most important audience is either that demographic or the people that influence that demographic. And the third thing is, when we get to brand, is how do you want people to see you? How do you want to be viewed? This may sound kind of obvious to you, but let me tell you, it is anything but. There are many ways to be successful. There are many ways to provide value. You might be somebody who's very numbers oriented and very rigorous, and like that's the skill you bring, right? I talked to somebody once who went into financial services and wealth management after being a math teacher for like 20 years. You can imagine that person's super meticulous. All right. You could also say, hey, the reason I'm so good at what I do is because I'm just so empathetic and I can really connect with people and build that trust and really get to know what they need and what they want. That's what I'm really good at. Both of those are completely valid, but probably not at the same time. And that's okay. So go, what are the 3 to 5 words that I want people to associate with me? That will help us as we go through that and really look at tactically how to share a message. We got to think of this strategically first. So how do we do that? So we've done this exercise. Again, you don't have time right now, but you're going to want to go through that. Then we can start looking at how we show up. And so the first place I would say is, how do you show up online? Think about your LinkedIn profile. If you saw your LinkedIn profile, and I'm using Brendan here as my my guinea pig, he's a good guinea pig because he's doing it well. All right, but you'd have to ask, you should ask yourself, if I didn't know me and all I knew about me was my LinkedIn profile, would I want to do business with myself? Hopefully the answer is yes, but it might not be, right? Because remember, your audience, the people that you're engaged with, they don't live in your brain. They don't know everything you think about 24/7. They can only see what's on the page, right? And so I've had this said to me many times over the years, well, I don't need to use digital platforms because all of my business is referral. I'm like, fantastic. First of all, great that you can build a business just through referral. But guess what people are doing these days when they get a referral, right? They're talking to their friend. Bill's like, oh yeah, you should talk to my insurance advisor. She's great. Her name is blah, blah, blah. Well, what do they do before they go and call you? Well, they do a little research first. In fact, what I would suggest is all of you also go and take the dreaded Google test. Go look yourself up. Just put your name. If it's a common name, maybe put the city that you live in and see what comes up. Because this, again, is what people are doing before they engage with you. In fact, it's what they're doing before they choose whether or not to engage with you, right? And if they don't see what they want to see here, they might just choose to move on to the next opportunity, right? So Brendan here, again, has done a fantastic job. If I look Brendan up, by the way, notice that the first thing I see here is his LinkedIn profile. Google loves LinkedIn. So the likelihood that they're going to put your LinkedIn profile number 1, 2, or 3, super high. But we've got his Twitter account. We've got Facebook. We've got some other NAFA properties. You got some photos from, obviously, a NAFA conference, like some really good stuff. If I Googled you right now, what would I find? All right. So we want to make sure that you've got great content out there where you're really sharing your message. And when I look at an optimized profile, when I think of somebody who's doing it well, their online presence and specifically their LinkedIn profile is answering 5 questions for people. It's answering, what problems does this person solve? It's answering, and yeah, I think we've got, oh, you got up there. I know there's another poll question we have, Brandon, so if you can pop that. Thank you. Perfect. Tell me what you think about your LinkedIn profile is. And by the way, there's no judgment here, circle of trust, even if you don't think it's great, totally okay. But I was saying there's 5 questions you have to answer. What problems does this person solve? You have to be able to tell the reader of your profile or of your presence who this person serves, i.e. who do you serve specifically? How would they engage with you? How would they start a conversation and continue it on? Where could they find more relevant information? And finally, why would they reach out to you as opposed to someone else who does the same thing, who solves the same problem for the same type of people? And I think that that's going to be so critical, because one thing I've heard from a lot of people in the financial and insurance spaces is that, there tends to be some commoditization of the industry in the minds of those that you serve, right? People go, oh, it's insurance. How is it different? It's just, I just need to get a financial plan. It's all the same, right? What's interesting is that the big differentiator is going to be you. And so you really want to make sure that your brand, again, your personal brand is coming through here. So let's look at some ways of you really taking your profile to the next level. And I love it. I'm looking at the poll results here. All right, we got 2 rock stars out there. Fantastic. We got somebody who needs a little bit of help. That's all right. That's why you're here. But this is kind of what I expected. Most people would say, hey, my profile is decent. Might need a little polishing, might need a little help, but I mean, it's okay. That's fine. I want to give you at least the start of the path towards having a rock star profile. It's actually not super challenging. You just have to know where to look. So there's three big sections that we can look at today as far as your LinkedIn profile and getting an immediate boost to the quality of your profile and your ability, again, to share who you are. Because that's a big thing about being a sales Sherpa is you got to be able to position yourself as a trusted advisor, as an expert, as somebody who can help them solve their problems. So the first thing we're going to look at is the images. There's actually only 2 images that you get on your LinkedIn profile. The first is your banner image. It's what I call the first impression, right? Most of you probably just have that blue with like little dots and lines on it. That's the default. But understand you can use this like a billboard, and it kind of sets the tone for the rest of your profile. These are just some examples, but you can have a picture of the team that you work with. This is the bottom one here is from a digital advertising agency that builds up online communities. So the individuals there have some technology, kind of cutting edge imagery. You just think of again, kind of that using my phone and talking to other people. That's the tone they wanted to set. You could have a branded image from the company you represent. You could have a branded image of you talking to a client, maybe, even if you can get that photograph. But if not, just again, get something that reflects the tone you want to set with the people you work with. So that's the first impression. The second place we want to look is our headshot. And this is something that makes people really, really nervous, right? They're like, I think mine's good. Or they're like, don't look at me. Don't look at me. Here's the deal with the headshot. You want to get 3 things right. And the way I say this is you want to be approachable, polished, and consistent. Look at your headshot and just go, is the person in it, are they approachable? Are they smiling? Do they have an open expression? Is it polished? Does it look like a nice professional headshot? That doesn't mean that it has to be an uptight, corporate, boring headshot, but it has to look like it was well done. If you just have a picture of you that you're at a wedding, and so you're like, I'm looking nice, I'll use this shot, and you've cut out your spouse, don't do that. Get a nice shot. You can do it easily. Look up social media headshot in your city, and you'll find photographers that have sittings specifically for these purposes. Very inexpensive, very quick. And finally, make sure that it's consistent. Does the person in the image look like what I'm reading about in the profile? If you talk about in the profile how you just work your tail off for your clients and you're always there and you just go the extra mile, and the photo is you fishing, right? Or there's a photo of you sitting on the beach. It's inconsistent, right? I don't trust you anymore. Don't do that. Make sure that it's consistent. The next place you want to look is actually your headline. Now, the headline, really important. It's 120 characters. And what it does is it sets, it does 2 things. One is it just grabs attention. I think of it like a newspaper article headline. It compels people, or hopefully compels people, to want to continue reading your profile. And also lets them know what they should expect as they read through your profile, right? Now, there's 2 ways of doing this. One is to just use your job title. The problem is job titles tend to not have a lot of information in them. Let's say your title is financial advisor, wealth manager, insurance agents. All right, those actually have very little meaning to people who are not in the industry. So therefore, they probably don't have a lot of meaning to the prospects and clients that you want to serve. So instead, we can use what's called a keyword-driven headline. And the way that I think about that is simply the idea of saying, I help blank with blank. So here's just even a couple examples. Helping retirees and pre-retirees secure their financial future. Showing business owners how to pass their business to the next generation. Providing medical professionals with a clear guide to building wealth and securing their legacy. Oh, I skipped giving first responders a roadmap for financial security. All these are options, and obviously, this is going to be very specific to what you do and to the people you serve. But can you imagine being a pre-retiree who's kind of worried about the next step in their life and their financial planning, and they get referred to you by a client of yours, and they go, I'm going to research this person. They look you up, and the first thing they see is that you help retirees and pre-retirees them secure their financial future. Oh, they go, wow, okay. All of a sudden, trust built, credibility established. I want to find out more about this person. I want to work with this person. That's what we're trying to do. So again, as a little bit of homework, after we're done, think about who do I help? Brainstorm a couple different demographics or a couple way of describing the demographic you work with. And what do I help them do? You know, is it I'm helping them minimize risk. I'm helping maximize gain. I'm helping them, you know, realize their financial future, realize their life vision, whatever it is, share it, because then they can, again, they can connect with that, and the likelihood of you actually having a conversation with them increases quite a bit. The third part, so there's three really big pieces we need to get right on the profile: the photo, the headline, and then the about section. Also, it used to be called the summary. And that can be really scary for people because it's just this big blank canvas where they're like, great, summarize your career and how you help people. Here's a very simple way, a very simple structure that you can use to craft it. It's three different parts. Each of these parts is short. It's usually like a paragraph, maybe two. And each of these paragraphs is just 2 or 3 sentences long. If you write a lot on a LinkedIn profile, nobody reads it because we don't read on screens in depth. We actually tend to scan websites quickly. So just 2 or 3 lines is going to be fine. So here's the 3 different sections. Number 1, tell people what you do. Don't be clever. Don't think, and this is kind of like your elevator pitch if you're doing networking in person. And a lot of times we think we have to be clever to be memorable. You don't have to be clever. You have to be direct, and you have to speak to the people you serve so that they go, yes, that's what I need. So just say, hey, I do this type of work for this type of client to get this type of result. That's actually what needs to go into your about section, because you can't, again, they're not mind readers. They don't know what you do until you tell them. The second part is the differentiator. And this is both an I statement and a we statement. Now, what do I mean by that? So differentiator is exactly that. This is what makes me different. It doesn't have to be unique, because most of us aren't unique necessarily. There's a lot of people in the world. But we can kind of come with our differentiator, what sets us apart from other people. And as I said, there's an I statement. So talk about what you bring to the conversation. Is it your experience? Is it your perspective? Is it your passion? Is it some knowledge that you have? Whatever it might be. I was speaking with somebody who's actually in the insurance business, he sold life insurance. And a very important and compelling part of his story was when he was in high school, his father passed away. Luckily, his father had purchased life insurance, which allowed his mother to, be financially secure, not have to worry about that. He was able to go to college. And obviously this had such an impact on him that it directed his career. He's like, I want to go into doing this. That's a really compelling story, and that should come through. Now, that's a story that many of us don't have, and you don't have to make something up here. But again, that would be passion that he brought forth into his client conversations. Think about, what do you bring into it? What is the special sauce that is your contribution to a conversation? That's what you'd add here. And the our statement, the our differentiator, is simply whoever you represent. If you work with a larger organization, you can say, hey, one of the things that we feel is really important, right? That's why I call it the we statement. We feel this is important, or we are known for this. This isn't a rehash of your company website, but there's a reason you chose to work with the company that you work with. Share it, right? And then finally, there's the professional statement, right? This is a combination of personal and professional. It's simply a chance to humanize yourself beyond just a job title. Now, this is not an online dating site. You don't have to say, I like long walks on the beach. I'm a Virgo. I enjoy fine dining. Actually, as an aside, who doesn't enjoy fine dining? It's like, I've yet to meet somebody who's like, I don't like good food. But what I mean by this is that you want to share a little bit of yourself in an authentic way, where you're saying, hey, this is who I am as a person, and allows you to connect with that other person on that human level. This can be about a hobby that you're really passionate about. It could be a nonprofit organization that you're really involved with. We've had people share everything from, hey, when I'm not working with my clients, I love to golf. That's kind of something that I'm passionate about. And then always share a detail. So this person was like, my favorite golf course was Mauna Loa. Or I was working with a woman who's like, I love to bake. And my office mates love when I make my mother's, I think it was like double chocolate upside down raspberry cake or something. It sounded ridiculously good. But that's all it has to be. If you look at the screen right now, this actually is for my profile where I say, hey, I played drums in a band for many years. And even though I don't play as much anymore, that's where I picked up the nickname. And that's actually where I got this very strange nickname of D Fish. But also, I have so many people asking me about music or say, hey, I play guitar. We have this wonderful human conversation. And as you know, if you have the human conversation, the business conversation gets that much easier, okay? So those are the three big parts that you have to get right. One other part I want to suggest that is worth spending some time is your experience section. Understand the experience section is not your resume. It is simply the story of your career. How did you get to here? How did you get to where you are right now? And so you don't have to have a bunch of boring bullet points, but rather talk about the different roles you had. As I said, put a short description in there. Talk about the transferable skills you developed. You can also add multimedia in here, so videos or PDF, slideshows. You can actually put that into your about section as well. And this depends, of course, a little bit on what your role is, where you are, what states you're in, licensing, all that kind of stuff. But for most individuals, any compliance language you need is going to go in here. So for example, FINRA and SEC have both said, if you have any securities licenses, any disclaimers or compliance language is going to go up into your experience section. So that's why I wanted to add that here. But notice, I mean, if you've got a great photo, you've got a great headline to grab attention, you share your story through the about section, and your experience section backs up your claims, that is how you have a great profile. By the way, is somebody going to do business with you just because of your profile? Not at all. But they're going to talk to you. They're going to get to that next step. And that's what we want to do. They're going to engage with you. They're going to engage with some trust. And that's where we're trying to go with that. And that's how you share your story. One thing I want to point out too really quick is that I went through a lot quickly. I do actually have a full LinkedIn profile worksheet that will actually walk through each section I just talked about. We have a page for the webinar. I'll make sure that you have that link when we're done. But so don't feel you need to like grab some notes really quick. We'll have all of that for you as well. Okay, so the second thing we do, we've got this great presence, but having a great presence doesn't matter if nobody knows about you, right? It's reputation and visibility. So we have to start connecting with people. And this is where we're really going to start to bring in both the digital and the offline skills that we have of relationship building. Okay, the biggest thing I can say to you here is our goal in building our business relationships isn't to become best friends with everybody. A lot of times people think that we tend to get business, we tend to do business with people we know really, really well. We might eventually become very close to them, but usually it starts with us working with people we don't know that well. And there's a lot of science behind this. There's a guy named Mark Granovetter who wrote one of the most cited ever papers in sociology called The Strength of Weak Ties. And what he found is that most people find work through people they know. Sounds kind of obvious. But he actually found that most of us find work through people that we don't know well, what he called a weak connection. And these are people that we see between once a week and once a year. And the reason why is because they have access to different spheres of knowledge. So that's what our goal is as far as developing new relationships. It's not like, hey, we just want to find 2 or 3 people and become best friends with them. We want to really cultivate a large and varied network. That's where more opportunities will come from. And one of the things I always say is that we talked about the different channels that are available to us to communicate. One is not better than the other. Online is not better than offline. Digital is not better than face-to-face in person. The goal is to actually create this circle where we're going back and forth between the two to build the relationship. Sometimes we're going to be online, sometimes offline. And if that's the case, where we start the relationship can be either offline or online. And that's super important right now because we can't do as much offline relationship starting, right? I never thought that this picture in my slide deck would bring back nostalgia for when we could sit in the lobby of a conference center and have a lanyard on, right? But right now, that's not going to be happening a lot. that's fine because we can still use these online tools to get started. And one thing that I tell people all the time, if you want to try to find prospects, you want to try to find clients, or just build relationships with referral partners and other people in your network, LinkedIn is a great tool for that. But the trick is not to just connect and pitch, which is what a lot of people do. You might have had exposure to that. Somebody reaches out to connect with you. The next message is, hey, can I sell to you, right? That doesn't work because you haven't established any value, any trust, any reason why somebody would want to actually give you their time and attention. So what I'm gonna suggest is that moving forward, you start to bring more people into your network. And this is a sample of language you can use. I wanted to reach out because blank. Now, it's not going to be I met you at this event, but it could be I saw a post that you did. I saw, a friend of mine. I even will say sometimes I like connecting with fellow Wildcats. I went to Northwestern University here in the Chicago area. So, hey, I always love talking to other alumni. And say, I'd like to connect. We do a lot of work in the blank space. And if I can ever be assistance, let me know. So all you're doing is saying, hey, I'd like to start a relationship. And then build that relationship. It might be seeing what they post on social media or something. Or maybe you're like, hey, I'd like to talk to this person. Here's some language that you can use to actually go out and have a conversation with them. Have that Zoom conversation with them, because right now we can't meet in person as easily as we could. But again, it's give them a reason why they should want to meet and have a conversation with you. The big thing, by the way, when you're starting out your business relationships, the key is not to speak. The key is to listen. And I love this quote from Dale Carnegie, still one of my favorite professional development books ever, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years trying to get other people interested in you. So again, whether we think about the offline, whether we think about a one-on-one conversation over Zoom, we think about LinkedIn, the beginning of our relationships are not about, hey, how do I tell people all about me? Even though it's very clear because we've done the work that we talked about in the first section. But rather it's, how do I listen to them? Like, let me give you a couple ideas, even using social media right now, not to speak, but to listen. If you think about that newsfeed, if you go to LinkedIn right now, you start scrolling through it, that's your newsfeed. Those are connections of yours who are sharing things that are important to them. Listen to them. Listen to things they're saying. It's going to give you a ton of information. It'll give you insights into what they're working on, but also insights into what is important to them and how you should engage with them in the future, right? Even just like jumping out, and we're talking about LinkedIn a lot, but even things like Twitter. Twitter is really powerful as a listening tool. So like I know NAFA has an account. We were talking about it before this session. Are you following them, right? Follow NAFA. Just hit that follow button because you're going to get access to information in such an easy and easily facilitated way, incredibly powerful, and things that we couldn't do 20 years ago. 20 years ago, let's say NAFA had an important advocacy issue, they'd have to, maybe 20 years ago we could send an email. 30 years ago, probably not, right? It'd have to be a newsletter or something. Now, immediately, they can share the important things that are happening in the industry, but you gotta listen. The other thing you can do is, beyond just listening, engage with people. So even if you don't use social media a lot, and you're not super comfortable with diving on to social media and posting, just liking and commenting on other people's material can be great. If you think about going to a conference, you think about going to a networking event, any in-person engagement, you have a conversation with people, right? You just don't stand there in the corner, hopefully not, right? You have a conversation. What's a conversation? Somebody says something, somebody else responds, says, oh, that's right, or oh, what about this? You can do that using social media. Somebody posts something that's interesting, hit that like button or comment, ask a question or say, hey, I really agree with this. Or have you thought about this? Or what's your experience in that? And have a conversation. Because then when you actually want to reach out and maybe, grab a more in-depth face-to-face conversation, they're gonna be much more amenable to it. The other thing you can do when you, specifically on LinkedIn, when you're hitting that like button or that comment button, what's really powerful is it lets the algorithm, the background algorithm that decides what content you see and what you don't and what other people see. When you engage with somebody's content, the algorithm, the computer goes, oh, these two people must know each other. I'll show them each content from the other more often. what a great way of staying in touch with people and having that visibility, which we talked about as an important part of your LinkedIn, of your personal brand. And by the way, I know we're going through this quickly. We're going to have time for questions in just a few minutes. So make sure that you're throwing any questions you have into the Q&A box, into the chat box. We'll be able to answer those when we're done. So the third thing I want to talk about is how do we then, so we've built our brand. We know how we want people to see us. We're starting to engage with them. We're starting to build relationships. How do we make these relationships effective? Well, understand, there's a difference, as a sales mentor of mine when I was young told me, there's a difference between it being an unpaid consultant and a paid salesperson, and that's creating action. But the way we do that is by cultivating these relationships over time so that, again, when our buyers are on their journey, when somebody's going, hey, I think I need to sit down with somebody and get some advice, get some help, you're the person that's easy for them to pick up the phone and call or pick up the phone and text, right? So understand that as we build these relationships, they need time, they need sharing. That's the difference between a transaction, happens once, done, and a relationship happens over time and evolves and grows. Well, understand, there's a lot of ways to use digital tools to build relationships. I don't think, as I said before, that we'll ever want to get rid of meeting in person. We'll ever want to get rid of conferences. But if we can keep all of that and add these other tools in, it's really powerful. So for example, I've mentioned this a few times already, but the Zoom phone call, the video phone call is so powerful because even though we're not in person, at least we get to have all of the facial expressions, the tone, the way we hold our body, all those things are incredibly valuable. By the way, you might see from the slide, this might look familiar. This is me talking with one of my contacts, Pat Helmers, who runs a fantastic sales podcast out here out of Chicago. But understand that even if you can't go out and meet in person, you still have the opportunity to see somebody face to face. Now, the one challenge, or actually, let me give you one tool to make this really effective as far as positioning yourself in people's minds. As I said, it's not all about speaking, it's about listening. And a tool that I often teach is called, around this topic, is called the next question. And it's very simple. Going back to that Dale Carnegie quote, if you want to, get to know people as opposed to trying to force them to get to know you, get really good at asking open-ended questions. I have a feeling that most of the people on this call, you're already really good at that, right? That's something that's kind of a hallmark of financial services, of insurance, of really helping people through these really important decisions they have to make. So we ask open-ended questions. We listen to their answer. Hopefully, you've got this one nailed. I know this is hard. A lot of times we don't listen because we're too busy thinking about what we want to say to them afterwards. The big thing here then is stop. Don't supply your own answer. It's very normal for somebody to ask a question, the next person answers, and then this person just responds and says whatever they want to say. Instead, stop, and this is the trick. Ask them another question based on their answer. What's great is this forces you to listen, right? Because you have to be paying attention to what they're saying, but then it makes you really grapple with what they said and put it back on them. Hey, even if you think about this in a planning scenario, what are your goals? They say my goals are A, B, and C. And you can go, well, I can help you hit them. Or you could say, why are those your goals? What is inspiring that? What is making you want to pursue that kind of legacy? Whatever it might be. But this becomes this cycle where you keep it on them. You find a lot of information. It makes it easier to find ways that you can provide value as far as products and services. But more than anything, this actually creates trust, and trust is valuable because social interaction is what our brains are for. The author, Jeff Colvin, who wrote Humans Are Underrated, makes this point very forcefully, that what we want to do is engage. We want to connect. Our brains are wired. That's why we have these big noggins to engage with other people. So all of what we're talking about today is simply finding more tools and more opportunities to have points of contact with people. Now, before I would have given this, before coronavirus, when I would give this message, we'd have a number of options available to us that aren't anymore. It's not as simple as just going to a conference. It's not as simple as going to a networking event in your own locality. It's not as easy as just walking to Starbucks and sitting there for a couple hours and having some meetings. So we do have to recognize that even though eventually we'll be back to having those, we don't have them right now. We still have so many other ways that we can engage with people. So instead of just putting our heads in the sand going, well, I mean, life's going to be hard. use all of these tools that we have available, right? LinkedIn posts, emails. Hey, direct mail. I guess that was kind of the first digital communication. Like before email, there was regular mail. Writing somebody a note, giving them a phone call. Yes, we can't have meetings or CPO events, but we can have all of these other forms of interaction with people. And they're so, so powerful if you use them. Because what you're doing, as we wrap up here, is you're answering 3 questions that your prospects, your clients, your network is asking. Why do I have a problem? How do I solve this problem? And who do I choose to help solve these problems? And that's what your conversations are doing. You're helping them understand why they have the challenges they do and how they can solve them. And by the way, when you do number 1 and number 2, it becomes very simple that you are the answer to number 3, okay? Finally, to wrap up, as far as sharing content and using these different channels, there is no secret weapon. There's no trick to using LinkedIn to get 10 leads a day, or hey, I'm gonna get all these clients because I'm really good at sharing a specific kind of content. But I will actually share these. You'll obviously have the recording. We can share these notes, but even when you're sharing content, the idea of just 2 to 3 times a week, even if you aren't sharing a lot of content now, start getting used to it. Sharing content 2 or 3 times a week, include some text, add a photo if you can, tagging some people. These are some advanced tools, but tagging some individuals in it, picking some hashtags to use, putting a URL, connecting people to another article or website can be so powerful. And it can be a great way of, again, helping people understand why they have the challenges they do, how they can possibly solve those challenges, and why you should be somebody that they can engage with. It improves both the visibility and the reputation. And that's really what solidifies you, whether it's on LinkedIn or in their email box, in their mailbox. When you have a conversation over video with them, that's what really solidifies you as that resource, as that sales Sherpa. And so just understand that these days, it's not as simple as just picking up the phone and getting a new client, right? Or getting more business from existing clients. What integrated outreach looks like is if you're going through all of these resources, using broadcast social media, digital follow-up, having a meeting, sending out hard copy, using broadcast social media where it's just one piece of content that goes to many, or having a conversation over email or text or some other digital platform. That's what it looks like. And so understand that success does not come through any specific trick, but doing the basic foundational activities really, really well, right? One of my favorite movies when I was young was the Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. But if you learn those basics, Daniel San learned karate. It's the same thing. You just have to be willing to engage in these activities, have a good LinkedIn profile, have good engagement through LinkedIn or whatever social platforms you're on, having the video calls, spending time to build the relationships before you ask for business. And of course, the biggest thing I'll say here is that you gotta start somewhere. So start today and pick one of the things. There's one thing today, whether it's improving your profile or whatever it is that was relevant for you, do it. Don't waste time, don't wait. Somebody's gonna look at your LinkedIn profile tomorrow and go, should I work with them or not? You want it to be good. Somebody could be engaging in a conversation with you tomorrow. If you're present, be present. And I think this will really help you move business along. So I know I went through a lot really fast. Hopefully you've had a chance to ask some questions. I know Brendan's been monitoring the Q&A chat box. If you haven't asked your question yet, type it in there. We want to answer it for you. But yeah, I'll pause for a second and let Brendan jump in here with those questions.
Well, David, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for being charitable and showing a picture of me that was pre-quarantine. That is much appreciated. And
no problem.
Luckily, my LinkedIn profile picture is a pre-quarantine picture, so that worked out just nicely. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
But I did want to say that the one part of your presentation where you talked about the theme of relationship takes time really resonated with me. And I think that it reminded me of a quote that's just so powerful, which is networking is giving.
100%. 100%. In fact, in my first book, Networking in the 21st Century, I talk about networking karma, right? And it's the idea of putting out to your network without agenda. In fact, I mean, yes, there's the agenda. We hope it comes back to us, but every person I know every really successful person I know is somebody who's a giver first. So for sure, for sure.
I'd like to remind our audience that we do have multiple ways that you can ask David a question. You can chat them in the chat box, or you can type them in the Q&A box. And we do have a few questions already. The first one is regarding the dreaded Google test that we saw earlier. What can I do if I don't have good stuff showing on the first page of Google?
Yeah, okay, really good question. And I find that a lot of times people ask this because they're afraid that there's something negative on the first page of Google. Like they're like, well, what if I have a picture of me from when I was in college, or doing something untoward? That happens every once in a while, but usually what people's biggest struggle is there's just not enough there. And so they might have their LinkedIn profile, maybe a company webpage, but that's it. The easiest way to fix that is to start taking ownership of some of your social biographies, i.e. the bios on things like Twitter or Facebook. Doesn't even mean that you have to be super active on them. In fact, I don't like Instagram. I don't even like Facebook that much, but I don't really use Instagram. I'm not a picture guy, but I have a profile there and it just says, hey, I'm not here often. Come find me on LinkedIn, right? But what that does is it helps me establish a footprint through social media. It helps, those often get caught up in that first page of Google. The other thing you can do is write articles. If you have a web page for your own company, make sure that your name's prominently featured and is there a couple times. If you work for a larger organization, see if they have professional bio pages or profile pages, which is very common. Those will actually be something that Google can find and will start to populate. So those are a couple ways that you can start to, you only have to get 10. Don't worry about page 2, but get the first 10, get ownership of those, and you'll be pretty good.
Now, I want to ask a follow-up question related to that first one, which is, if you find some stuff on your Google output up at the top or close to the top that you really don't like and you're really not comfortable with, I mean, I would assume that the approach would be to try to get new content to push up to the top. But can you talk a little bit about strategies for that? I know that's a long discussion. But.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of do the same thing, right? And what you really do is look for, I mentioned that Google likes LinkedIn. Google gives different websites different rankings. And so what you'd want to do if you have something that, again, you don't like, maybe it's a negative blog article, or, maybe in a past life you got in a little trouble with the law. And I've actually seen that, not huge, but, or maybe you had a business partner that in the past where you kind of dissolved the business and it didn't go well, and there's some press on that. That's actually, that happens. Try to find, again, that's why I say social media platforms, the big ones, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Google likes that one a lot. You can, there are companies that will help you with that, but really all they can do is exactly what we're talking about. They just might help you do it. But Google, Google is what Google is, right? It's not going to say, oh, you don't like that article? We'll remove it. That's really, really hard. It's better just, again, if you can get 10, all the negative stuff goes to the second page, and content marketers have a joke. If you want to hide a dead body, put it on page 2 of Google because nobody will find it. So
we have another question. How do I make sure my network doesn't get notified if I make a lot of profile changes? And I assume the questioner is speaking in the context of LinkedIn about that.
Okay, yeah. That's a great question for everybody. If you're ever going to make a lot of changes to your profile, and I know we have a lot of people who want to polish it up a bit, if you simply go to the settings page, if you can't find it, literally just Google, LinkedIn settings page, and it'll show you where to find it. You click on your photo in the upper right-hand corner. It'll say settings, account settings. But there's actually a button you can click that says notify my network of profile changes, and just unclick it. So, that's something I know on the blog, on my blog, I've got an article on how to do that, but it's that just Google search it, and they'll have a very, you'll find something that gives you kind of a step-by-step. It's 3 steps. It's really easy, but very useful because you don't want people to think you've got a new job or something. No, it's, turn that off if you're going to make a lot of changes.
Well, that's about all the time that we have left today, and I want to thank David J.P. Fisher, also known as D-Fish,
Thank you.
for this outstanding presentation and for lending his time and expertise today. As you can see, you can contact David at D-Fish at davidjpfisher.com. And also, as you can see up on the screen, he has a website that you can visit. And I invite you to certainly order and read his book, Networking in the 21st Century, on LinkedIn. I have a copy, and it's a tremendously helpful book that will expound on what we learned today. And I also want to thank all of our participants for joining us today. We can't do this without you, and we appreciate you all very much. Please look back at NAFA.org under events for our archives, where we will be placing the recording of this webinar. This concludes the broadcast.